In today's video, we have several NHL trade rumors I want to discuss, a little bit of a Sunday rumor roundup, plus some more prospect signings to discuss as well. We'll jump into the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we have a bit of a Sunday rumor roundup for you and some prospect signings. So let's start here with some of the signings first, and we'll jump into the trade rumors here momentarily. Now, the Toronto Maple Leafs have signed a pair of players, including 2018 fifth-round selection Filip Krawls, a Czech-born prospect who's been playing in the Western Hockey League for the Spokane Chiefs. Had a pretty solid season this past year, putting up close to a point per game, so he'll now start his entry-level deal with the Maple Leafs. We've also signed 22-year-old Latvian Christian Rubins, who was previously with the organization on a minor league-only deal, so he'll now have a two-way official NHL contract. The New York Rangers have signed a college free agent who's been undrafted. They signed Justin Richards, who's a center iceman as well as a wing. He completed his fourth season with the University of Minnesota Duluth, so he'll now join the Rangers organization. And the Chicago Blackhawks have signed a pair of third-round picks from the 2017 NHL Draft, including center iceman Evan Barrett, who's played his NCAA hockey at Penn State. The Chicago Blackhawks have also signed 2017 third-rounder from the KHL, Andre Altibarmakian, who's put up some solid numbers in the KHL and is now going to be getting his pro contract, so he'll be coming over to join the Hawks in North America and likely get started in their American Hockey League affiliate next year. Now let's jump over to the latest NHL trade rumors. Obviously, there's not as many of these anymore with the season being on pause, but we do have a bit of a Sunday rumor roundup to discuss today. And let's kick things off with the Pittsburgh Penguins and another potential goaltender controversy that could be brewing. Of course, as we know, back when Vegas entered the NHL during the expansion draft, they lost Marc-Andre Fleury, who at that point had been their starting goaltender for quite some time, but the last year or so, leading up to that, of course, he was kind of, 1A, 1B type of situation with Matt Murray. Of course, Murray played a lot in the playoffs, helped them get to the Stanley Cup, and clearly, had kind of started to take over, and they transitioned away from Fleury to Murray. Rather than trade him, they let him go in the expansion draft, I guess to help them protect the rest of their roster, since they knew that was very likely going to happen. Of course, he's gone on to have some pretty good success in Vegas as well. Now, of course, now they have Murray and Jerry. Tristan Jerry had a tremendous year, arguably outplayed Matt Murray, and Matt Murray needs a new contract this year. He's an RFA. Of course, has a lot of, good things on his resume, a couple of Stanley Cups, so he's likely going to be looking for a longer-term big-time contract would be my guess, but at least it was best that he could get. Hard to say exactly what the dollar figure is going to be. I would have to estimate at least around $6 million probably would be my guess. On a longer-term contract. Hard to say exactly what he's looking for, but it's going to be substantial. And of course, the Penguins are a team. They're going to have some tough decisions to make based on the salary cap likely not going up. He's not the only contract they have to look after. And like I said, tough decisions going to have to be made, and it's not just about the salary cap anymore. It's we have another expansion draft coming up in the near future. Within a year, the Seattle team will be entering the NHL, and teams are going to be losing another player, and they could be in another situation to lose another really solid goaltender, which obviously they would probably prefer not to do. They'd would rather trade one of them, I would think, to get somebody back in return and actually protect their assets better in that regard. There was a lot of talk leading into the current season, before it was paused like last summer, that Tristan Jerry would possibly be traded. Did have some discussions around that, but nothing materialized. At this point, I think they're pretty happy that they decided not to move him, but obviously now they have another situation where somebody's likely going to have to go in order to protect themselves here, and it makes sense that Matt Murray would be that guy to be traded. There's always teams looking for goaltending. The offseason would be the time when a big-time goaltender could be on the move. There could very well be some other substantial goaltenders on the market when free agency finally kicks in as well. Clearly, with the pause season right now, there's lots of question marks around a lot of teams, around free agents, even some RFAs like Murray as well. So certainly hard to say exactly where this is going to go, but it makes a lot of sense that the Penguins will likely move a goaltender once the offseason officially kicks in, and that Matt Murray would be the guy to go to keep Jerry. They also have Casey DeSmith under contract for a couple more years, and he could very well prove to be a pretty solid asset as well as a backup goaltender if Jerry's able to finally take over to be the starting netminder. So let me know your thoughts on the Penguins goaltending situation. Does it make a lot of sense that Matt Murray could find himself on the move this summer and get that big-time contract possibly from another team while Tristan Jerry takes over between the pipes full-time in Pittsburgh? Now, another trade rumor that's been brewing as well in New York, and this was mentioned in the New York Post by Larry Brooks in the column, about the possibility the Rangers may be looking to acquire a number 2 center, and there's been some questions about them possibly being linked to the Edmonton Oilers and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now, of course, there's not a lot of talk about Nugent Hopkins being traded by the Oilers, but I can understand why he'd be possibly a player of interest for the New York Rangers. He can play center. He's got a pretty solid pedigree. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so obviously he likely would want to come with an extension if they were to make an acquisition. And he's also proven he can be a pretty solid left winger as well, oftentimes playing the wing with McDavid or Draisaitl at times in the past, and it's worked out relatively well. So he can be a pretty versatile player, and obviously a lot of what the Rangers are going to do and decide to do is going to be dependent upon what they have for contract negotiations with current players like Ryan Strome, who certainly filled in quite nicely in that number 2 center spot, but they might be cautious about overpaying him too much money on too long of a term, depending on how those negotiations go. So a lot of that, like I said, is going to depend on how those play out. I mean, if he can get him under contract for a reasonable amount, they very well might not go down the road of looking to make a trade for a number 2 center. Now, if any of this does come to fruition, it is quite possible that they could move defenseman Tony DeAngelo. Now, DeAngelo, I think, is another player they probably would prefer not to trade, but is another guy who's a restricted free agent, needs a new contract, and has earned himself a big-time deal after back-to-back solid seasons playing on very team-friendly 1-year deals. He's going to need some more term and more money, and the Rangers might be a little leery and be able to squeeze it in under the cap depending on how the salary cap works out once that's all settled for the upcoming offseason. So obviously DeAngelo would be a player of interest to the Edmonton Oilers. They would certainly love to add another offensively gifted defenseman on their blue line, and if they were to move Nugent Hopkins, it would make a lot of sense that would be the type of player they would be looking for here in return. So, of course, no guarantees any of this happens, but it does make sense that Nugent Hopkins might be of interest to the Rangers, and if the Oilers were to entertain those discussions, that DeAngelo likely would be the ask in return. So let me know your thoughts on the possibility of a DeAngelo for Nugent Hopkins trade between the Oilers and Rangers. Does that deal make sense? Do you think the Rangers are more likely going to retain Strome and DeAngelo, or could they be making some trades if they want too much money? Now, sticking in the Metro Division, let's jump over to the Columbus Blue Jackets, another team with a pair of solid goaltenders having a solid year in Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins. Clearly, those two guys are needing new contracts, and we could find one of them on the move here as well. Similar situation I mentioned with the Penguins. It's not all about money and contracts. There is a Seattle expansion draft that's going to factor into this as well, and both of them have proven enough that they can probably get themselves a decent extension. The Blue Jackets may not want to commit too much term or money to both goaltenders, which would certainly make a lot of sense. So it is possible one could be traded, because if they don't go down that road, one of them would be exposed to the expansion draft, and I would think the odds of one of them being picked by the Seattle franchise would probably be pretty high. They're at a good age, and right now, depending on what they get for a contract, they might not be making a ton of money, so certainly would be a reasonable deal for an expansion team. Hard to say exactly who else is available, so can't say for sure that would happen, but I think the odds of one of them being plucked by the Seattle franchise are pretty good if that were to remain the same. So the we very well could see a Columbus Blue Jackets trade this summer involving one of their goalies here as well. Hard to say which one they would prefer to keep and which one they would prefer to sign. A lot of it very well could come down to negotiations on either side to see which one would make more sense for them to keep longer term. But let me know your thoughts on the possibility of a Blue Jackets goalie being on the move, and which one do you think makes more sense for them to sign longer term to keep with the Blue Jackets. Now, lastly here, I want to jump over to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, one of their big priorities this offseason, once it finally kicks in, will be signing center iceman Anthony Cirelli. He's going to be needing a fairly substantial contract, in my opinion. I think they're going to be willing to commit some longer term and some decent money to this young player who's been nothing but win at every level he's played at. It's proven to be a really solid, big piece of their team moving forward. Cirelli's new contract is likely going to cause some cap casualties in Tampa, and the two most likely players who could find themselves on the move would be Tyler Johnson or Alex Killorn. Now, what complicates this a little further is they both have a form of a no-trade clause, with Tyler Johnson having a full no-move, and it stays that way for one more year before becoming a modified no-trade, where Alex Killorn currently has a full no-move, but becomes a modified with a number of teams being able to be traded to once he's into the next year of his contract. So once the NHL offseason officially kicks in, then that contract clause will be changed, so they have a little bit more flexibility on trading Killorn, and I think he would be the more logical of the two to move anyway. I think he'd have a little bit more value and a little bit more of a intrigue from other teams to possibly pick him up. He's really been a solid player for the Lightning his whole career. Certainly somebody who can bank game in and game out for a solid effort, puts up some pretty decent numbers, and I can't imagine why there wouldn't be some big interest from around the league to pick him up from the Lightning, but they're not going to sacrifice a young player like Cirelli in order to keep one of those two players. players. He said he's been a big part of their team and has really proven to be worthy of that long-term contract, which, like I said, unfortunately is going to cause some tough decisions elsewhere on the team. And we get the big contract now for Andrei Vasilevsky kicked in. They're going to have some other deals as well and other decisions that need to be made. Of course, they got big time contracts for guys like Stamkos and Kucherov. Braden Point's deal is fairly substantial as well. So clearly, they're going to have some casualties. Johnson or Killorn, one of the two or both, could find themselves on the move once the NHL offseason finally kicks in. So, of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions on everything we discuss here today. Let me know your thoughts on today's Rumor Roundup, and we can continue the discussion down in the comment section. With everything going on in the world in this crazy time that we're living in right now, I certainly hope everybody watching is staying safe and healthy, and I will catch you next time.